So Stormers review for 2018 this season. Yeah, safe to say is a pretty tough year, tough season for the Stormers. Ended up finishing 11th overall with a record of 6 wins and 10 losses, same as the Bulls, but managed to finish ahead of the Bulls once all the math was done. Points difference, I would imagine, was that one, but didn't really matter at the end of the day. Anyway, it's a big difference from 2017 where they were 10 wins and 5 losses and towards the top of the table. So definitely a big letdown. I've done a few of these reviews recently and I've looked at Sunwolves, kind of middling, hard team to know where they're at with the amount of guys that kind of come and go from that team. The Blues on the way down, the Reds and the Bulls I feel are kind of coming up. And now we get to the Stormers, and I feel like, yeah, man, any progress that I thought they made from 2016 to 2017 seems to be out the window here. Because, I mean, you remember that 2016 season where they did so well, and then as soon as they played the Chiefs, they got beaten by 60 points to 21 over in Cape Town, and it was embarrassing. And then the next year, they beat the Chiefs in the regular season, and you know there was that moment with Lade's offload. It was just like, wow, the Stormers have improved so much. And then this year, yeah, it doesn't seem to be there. Now, I'll just say, first of all, I'm pre-recording this video. I'm probably on a plane as this video goes live. I'm heading back to New Zealand, so if you guys leave any comments, I'll reply to them once I get back, but I am pre-recording it, so just a heads up. I should say, before I get to the good and the bad for the Stormers, that their season was affected by a lot of factors. So, firstly, I mean, it was the injuries. You look at some of their big-name players who played none or very few games. You look at Bongi and Banambi, 3 games. Franz Malherbe played 6 games. Schickerling played 4 games. Vermaak played 2 games. Sinatla played 5 games. Etzebeth didn't play at all. The list goes on. It was a hard season in terms of, you know, Stormers with injuries. And some of it was just crazy, man. Banambi had his appendix go on him, so that kept him out for ages. So they were playing Samuels, who was their third choice hooker. And they had to take, what was his name, Dean Muir on tour as well, their 4th choice. There's not many teams that could operate that successfully with, you know, their 3rd and 4th choice guys. So I do take that kind of into consideration. And also they had a tough run with the schedule because they had 1 game at home and then were immediately bags packed on their tour of Australasia, where they went none from 3. And then they had to immediately come home and play the Blues, who had already been in South Africa. So that despite the fact that the Stormers were the home team, they were the ones who would have had jet lag from that trip from New Zealand. And, week 13 they were at home, week 14 they were in Hong Kong, week 15 they were back at home, and they had a bye. Week 17 they were in Buenos Aires, and week 18 they were in South Africa. So there's a lot of games where the Stormers had gotten off a plane in the last kind of 6 days. So that definitely doesn't help. They didn't get their first bye until week 9, which is pretty much halfway through the competition. So, and with their injuries early on, they surely, I don't know if it would have made a difference, but they could have used the bye earlier on. I mean, you can't control, when you need a bye to have guys coming back from injury, but it was just things didn't fall their way in terms of the schedule this year. So there is that. I take that into consideration because I remember that one year that John Plumtree was in charge of the Sharks and they had a ton of injuries and he got sacked. Was it at the end of the season or during the season? But it was a mistake. They shouldn't have sacked him. They should have kind of taken things into consideration. So I've got that on one shoulder as the other one. The devil's there saying that Fleck needs to go and blah, blah, blah. I've kind of got that balancing things out, the angel and the devil. But anyway, there were a few good things for the Stormers. They were number 1 at stealing opponents' line-out ball. Not to say their own line-out was very good, because it wasn't. But number 1. Number 5 at goal kicking, 81%. Number 4 for tackles. The tackles is kind of average tackles made per game. It's kind of a hard stat because the more you're tackling, in theory, the more you don't have the ball. So that's not necessarily a positive stat. But they were 10th for missed tackles. So when you put those two numbers together, they were making a lot of tackles, but bottom end of missing tackles. So at least that's kind of, if you were fourth at making tackles and first at missing tackles, then something's wrong. But fourth at tackling, 10th at missing. 12th in line breaks conceded, so that's towards the correct end. Second for winning penalties, so that's good. I mean, part of that would have been their scrum, which in some games was dominant. And fourth in average turnovers, so that's another area they would have been able to get penalties as well. So there were some good points from this season, but there were also a lot of bad ones. So they were 13th on average points scored. 13th, which is pretty poor. 15th, so dead last for average tries scored. And this is a talented Stormers team as well. 15th for average line breaks, so dead last. I mean, I guess line breaks and tries often go together. 12th in tackle busts, even 10th in offloads. And I mean, just measuring offloads for offload's sake is not that useful, because often it's better to hold on to the ball than to throw a stupid offload, which is going to be a 50-50 or perhaps lead to a turnover. But I still feel like the Stormers should be better than 10th. Their own line-out was at 80%, which is good enough for 12th, so towards the bottom end. And they were 4th overall for errors, so for handling errors and things like that. 4th. When they did have the ball, they were often making mistakes with it. So there's this unfortunate combination of things there which didn't bode well for the Stormers season. Their home record was okay. So they went 6 wins and 2 losses. So that's an admirable record. If you can get a couple of away wins, then you're well on your way. But the problem is they didn't get any away wins. There was absolutely no luck for the Stormers on the road, and that was including a game to play the Sunwolves. But also, this is what I'm talking about when I say their schedule was hard. Like, some teams got to play the Sunwolves early before they'd really got a chance to form their kind of chemistry as a team, whereas the Stormers got them pretty late on when they'd already kind of had three-quarters of a Super Rugby season to get together. So that kind of thing didn't help. Highlights, you'd have to say their 37-20 win over the Blues. I know it's only the lowly Blues, but you got to remember the Stormers were coming back from New Zealand after a poor tour where they'd gone 3 losses in a row. The Blues had just won over the Lions in Johannesburg, so they were already in South Africa, coming from altitude down to Cape Town. And then, the Stormers just dominated that game. So it was over a lowly team, but it was a kind of against the odds one for the Stormers. They also beat the Bulls 29-17, and at that time the Bulls had recently gone 3 from 4, and the one that they lost, only lost by like 1 point to the Highlanders. So the Bulls were in good form, and the Stormers managed to get kind of revenge over them for an earlier loss in the season at Loftus. But obviously lowlights, lost to the Sunwolves 23-26 with that drop goal. A few ones where the Stormers kind of had that last minute heartbreak. That one against the Waratahs 34-27 where they gave away, I believe it was from a line-out mistake. They gave away a final try. So it was definitely not pretty for the Stormers away from home this season. Still, there were some guys who impressed. Obviously, Pieter-Steph du Toit, he's got good numbers for runs, for tackles, for pilfers. He was just an all-round solid performer all year. Kitsoff is one of the best loose heads in the game. Wukolo is no slouch either. And Damien Willemse has come along really well. He's kind of proven himself to be a Super Rugby level number 10, so that's very encouraging going forward. A lot of names as well. If you look at the guys contracted for next season, the whole core of the Stormers squad is still on for next season. So in terms of having to sort things out, the Stormers are in a pretty good place. I mean, some people would argue some of these guys shouldn't have contracts. They'd like to see more of a clean-out. But the core squad is still there. There's no Rule Ka Duvanaka because those guys are all leaving. I know Duvanaka gets a lot of grief, but I don't mind Duvanaka. I think he's a decent player. Flex on for another year as well. I think he had a 4-year contract. So that first year was the one where they got humiliated by the Chiefs in that quarterfinal. Second year showed much improvement, even though they still went out to the Chiefs. It was a much closer game. So up, and then back down. So he's had 2, one middling year, 1 good year, and now a bad year. So he's got 1 more year to kind of get things right. provided he keeps his job. I mean, I think there's kind of goings on in Western Province rugby, so we'll have to kind of watch that situation. But assuming he's coaching next season, we'll see how he goes. I'm just a bit disappointed that we didn't quite see the skills level there. Like, I mean, you look at that offload from Lades last season as kind of that magic example of how the Stormers' skills level had come along. And, Paul Feeney's there. I think his coaching role has changed, but he was initially a skills coach, so you're kind of hoping, that's what I mentioned with the offloads, that they were going to get that kind of thing right. They were going to be able to execute those key skills at key moments, and it just didn't happen this year. Yeah, got another year to get things right. Like I said, the core of the squad is still there, although Damien Willemse is, I'm not sure what his contract status is. I'm hoping he's back for another year because he's certainly impressed, so we will see. Hopefully injuries are more favourable next year as well, because they certainly got... I mean, all teams had injuries, but I feel like there were times when it was just like salt in the wound for the Stormers with injuries. So, yeah, didn't make the playoffs. It's the first time in a while. It is disappointing. And, yeah, it's not one where you look at it that optimistically, but same players for the most part, same coaching staff, minus the injuries and a slightly easier schedule. Can they get it right? That's the question. You guys let me know your thoughts in the comments, and once I get back to New Zealand, I'll have a read and I'll talk to you there. Alright guys, see you later.